So, Mr. Smith, Mr. Hughes, leadership team of Palmetto Goodwill, such an honor to be back here in North Charleston. And Goodwill it's good to be home. I arrived here 5 years ago in Charleston in the fall of 2016 to work for South Carolina Voc Rehab Department, which you know well, on Dorchester Road. I was the first deaf counselor in 30 years in the whole state of South Carolina. Not just in Charleston, but in the whole state of South Carolina. So there had never been a deaf counselor, rehabilitation counselor here. So since what, the 70s, all the way up. So the Charleston office took a chance on me. So I had the deaf and hard of hearing clients on my caseload, and to be honest, when I got here, I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't know the state of South Carolina, personally. All I knew was I-95. That's the only thing I was familiar with, from New York to Florida, and south of the border. That's about all I knew of South Carolina. You know, the Mexican sombrero and all that, that's about all I knew of South Carolina. So to be honest, yeah, I had no other knowledge of it. I didn't know what was involved and, you know, or what was here. So just drove through it for a few hours once in a while. I didn't, you know. Now I realize how beautiful South Carolina is and what a blessing it is to be here. When I arrived in Charleston, I didn't know what resources, what kind of services were available in Charleston, and honestly, it was kind of a blank slate, and it was like a blank canvas, and I didn't know what to paint with, you know? I didn't know what the colors were going to look like. But I was ready. I was curious to see what Charleston had to offer. And there were many barriers I learned for the deaf community, myself included. As a deaf person, luckily I have experienced, you know, those kind of barriers before. I've had to pioneer through those in the past. It wasn't my first time, so I knew it was time to roll up my sleeves and get to work. Break down those barriers. And sometimes the barriers kind of feel like traffic on 526 and I-26 at night, right? Kind of backed up, and it felt, you know, feel like you're stuck. But we all know what that means. You got to find a back road and a different way to go. To get home, to get to work, meet with your clients, go to their job sites. And that was Charleston for me. First thing I learned very quickly was, like I said, that the resources are very limited for the deaf community. However, I also learned that the deaf community here in Charleston is very rich. Even with limited resources, it's a very rich community. And they cooperate together, they're very united. Really strong Southern hospitality, which I haven't seen in other places that I've lived, even not in Greenville. There's some of that in the upstate, but there's something special about Charleston. Yeah, it's got a special vibe. And they're always looking out for other people, for each other, making sure that everybody's okay. And they always cheer for each other, they're rooting each other on, they want to see each other succeed. And so during my time, when I look back at 2016, I remember my first day in my office. I sat down and I asked the interpreter who was there that day, just out of curiosity, how many, I wanted to pick her brain, and I have high expectations, and I want high expectations from my clients. I want them to have the best services, right? I want them to have good earning potential, and they deserve the best. I'm not going to lower my expectations for my clients. So it doesn't matter if you're in South Carolina, New York, Boston, West Coast. Expectations should be the same. So I sat down and I picked her brain. I said, how many nationally certified interpreters are here in this area in Charleston? She said, 7, but 2 of them are full-time employees at a facility. I was floored. I said, could you repeat that? I wanted to make sure I understood. She said 7, total of 7, but 2 are, full-time employees somewhere else. 7. So how am I going to help my deaf clients find jobs if there's really 5 available interpreters for all of the interpreting needs in the Charleston area? They're going to need job interviews, and how is this going to work? Yeah, I was floored. So I learned very quickly how to adapt. Adaptation is a skill, right? It's a very valuable skill. And the deaf people in this area have to learn also how to adapt to their environment. So I said, all right, so we got 5 certified interpreters, and their, schedules are going to go up and down. So we'll find a way. I've got to find a way. So I said, all right, this is what we've got to work with, so that's what I've got to work with. So I learned to book my appointments 2 months in advance, and reserve all of the certified interpreters. They were for my own uses. I said they're all mine, and did what I had to do to make sure that the deaf people would get interviews and have an interpreter available for their job interviews. But where am I going to place them in employment? I don't have to worry about interviewing or interpreting for job interviews if I don't find them jobs first. So, like I said, I was new to the city. Where am I going? I thought, where am I going to find jobs for these people? So I've learned that relationships are very important part of we're a very important part of the job. And once you set up, that relationship with someone, that's powerful. And for them to be able to understand, because of course, understandably, deaf people are really nervous. They've learned over and over that deaf people they can't hear, so they don't know if there's an emergency. They make excuse after excuse of why they shouldn't hire a deaf person, and they're scared. So what I would do is, once I had that relationship established with employers, look them straight in the eye and say, I hear your concerns, but deaf people are the hardest. If you hire a deaf person, they'll be the hardest working employee you have, because they've overcome all of these barriers, and they will be your hardest working employee. Very valuable. They may not have all the tools you want, but each person has their, who's going to work for you, each individual person. Everybody has, everyone, all of us have gaps, right? We all have weaknesses. But they will work so hard to overcome in what they lack that you will be astonished. And look at me, for example. Somebody trusted to hire me to move here to Charleston as a deaf counselor. And so I'm living proof. I have a master's degree. Somebody, awarded me a master's degree. I couldn't make this up. So in looking back, I think to myself, how did I arrive in Charleston? How do I find myself here in Charleston? So I contacted at the time, state coordinator of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services for Voc Rehab, and I said, how did you just, out of all the people available, how did you decide to offer me the job? What made you think that I was a good fit? And her quote was, and I'm going to read it. Yeah. I knew that the Charleston office needed a deaf counselor for the deaf and hard of hearing caseload, not only to relate to the clients, but to set an example of work ethic. Jason had been my boss 10 years prior in a different company, so I knew he was a professional, did his job well, and was easy to get along with and work with. I knew the clients would connect and that he would do everything in his power to help his community. So now I understand that Palmetto Goodwill, which is one of my favorite places to visit, that you have at least 3% of your Ability One employees are deaf and hard of hearing. And that you're offering ASL classes. That's incredible. That's a perfect example of, it reminds me of when I visited here and on all my travels, and I was always, Reggie and I were always, touring all these sites and stuff together, and I just really love this place. Got to see and travel to so many different places, and he would show me your work sites and what you were doing here, and and I got to meet all the deaf employees that you already had. And now I can see that, the excitement around here that you set up ASL classes, which means you've improved accessibility for your employees. It's beautiful. That is a perfect example of how, a person, a leader, can do something, that the way that you guys can help your deaf employees feel included. And even though I was only here for 1 year, and I had wished it was longer, I really did, and I was unfortunate. I had hoped to stay with that agency for much longer, but that didn't pan out. But the important part for me was in that 1 year is I felt like I was able to plant some seeds within the deaf community and agencies like yours. I was able to place almost 40 deaf people into jobs in the year in 10 months really. So I started with a blank canvas and left with, 40 people newly employed in 10 months. It was tough, but in the Voc Rehab system, that's kind of unheard of to have that, number. Maybe a caseworker can get 10 to 20 placed in a year's time, but 40, and there weren't a lot of resources, like I mentioned, here in this city. But we all know that Charleston is called the Holy City, right? And I feel like something happened magical here, and it wasn't me. I think it was the teamwork. People believed in something. We believed in a mission. Core values and perseverance. And it paid off. And now 5 years later, to be back here in 2021, I hope that the tree that we planted is growing and it's living proof. You guys have an ASL class and it's expanding, successful. The tree is growing and it's getting big and beautiful. And things will change, and maybe that specific tree or other trees will, start to wither and die, but you have a blueprint now in place and of how to do this work. I'm really honored that Palmetto Goodwill recognized me in this way And it's not for me, this word really isn't for me, it's for all of us and all of Charleston and the deaf community here in Charleston. They worked hard and they've been successful in staying in competitive employment. I know that something magical happened that year, that something magical happens beyond the I-95 now, once you get over here to I-26. Thank you so much.